All right, our number two running back in college football, one of the biggest transfers of the 2024 cycle was Quinshon Judkins going from Ole Miss to Ohio State now and forming by far the best backfield in college football with Travion Henderson, who we already talked about as our number six player on this list, man. But Dawn, a big reason for Ohio State having the best backfield in America is by having maybe the best running back in America. This is a really good argument for Quinshon Judkins to be number one on this list, but he checks in at number two. But what makes Judkins so special?
He can do a little bit of everything, man. And I think even this year, people talked about it. Ole Miss, Judkins had a down year. Well, down year was still 1,150 yards and 15 touchdowns, right? And
In the
I think
SEC, yeah.
in the SEC West, no less, playing teams
Yeah.
playing teams like Bama and LSU and everybody else in A&M and all these teams they have to play. No, Judkins, it's a little bit of everything. He's a determined runner. He can make you miss. I believe. Does he lead the nation over the last 2 years in forced missed tackles?
Leads the
He's
Power
not
Five.
leading. It's close.
It's a Power Five. I know. I think Power Five for forced missed tackles. But yeah,
he can handle a workload. Right. 2022, he had a 1,500-yard season with a 90 rushing grade. I think to me, he's this high because his floor is incredibly high. We've seen the production. There's not too many guys on this list that have 2 full years of production, if any, like Judkins does. Going to Ohio State with Chip Kelly, and again, I think one thing for me with Judkins last year, I think he started to wear down. He got a massive workload, well over 300 touches in that Ole Miss offense. I think having Chip Kelly there, I think having Travion Henderson as the partner in this offense is really going to help. I think Judkins could be more efficient with a handful less touches. Last year, I think averaging over 25 touches per game. You could see it through week 9, an 87.2 rushing grade, and then his last 5 games, 76.4. You could just see it. It just started to grind. It started to grind down, right? And I know they had Ulysses Bentley, but they leaned on Judkins for everything, man. And I just think you take his floor, you take what we saw in 22, and even for parts of last season, it's hard to argue. I can't argue Judkins outside of the top 4 on this list. I think I even had him 4th on my list. But I don't. You can't argue him any lower than that. He's one of the best backs in the country. There's a 2-year sample. He's going to an elite situation. Like you said, he might be the biggest transfer at the end of the day out of anybody in the country. And to join a situation like that where he gets to go into Chip Kelly's offense and split time, even though he'll probably get still something like 20 touches a game, but to split time with Henderson can take some of the more physical touches. Judkins maybe could get out in space. He's a little bit better in space than Henderson. It's just to have those 2 guys in the same room. It isn't. We talked about it when we had Travion. It's not fair to have these 2 guys, and they do have different skill sets that complement each other big time.
yeah, absolutely, man. And Quinshon Judkins, the reason why I had him number 2 on my list, and you can even argue him up to number 1, I think, is because over the last 2 years, man, he's been so damn productive in his first 2 years of college football too. It's not like he's an older player; he's only a true junior right now. Over the last 2 years. 2,726 rushing yards, leads the Power 5. 1,800 yards after contact, leads the Power 5. 154 forced missed tackles, leads the Power 5. So he has been dominant over the last 2 years at Ole Miss. Former 3-star recruit, too. Like I said before, like it wasn't like he came in as this 5-star heralded prospect. Kind of shocked everyone, which is how dominant he was as a true freshman. And then followed it up with a great sophomore year. Now goes to Ohio State for his junior year as well. Fantastic contact balance at 6 feet tall, 219 pounds. Only 2 fumbles on 583 career touches as well. So really, really safe with the football as well. Ole Miss, by the way, didn't really help him out at all in terms of run blocking. They were 81st in run blocking grade this past year and 89th the year before as well. So Quinshon Judkins, man, was grinding out the yards the hard way, and he has been one of the most productive running backs in college football, and why he checks in at number 2 on this list. All right, Dalton, what are some of the negatives, though, when you watch Quinshon Judkins' tape?
So I think there's something this year at least too, like there's an all or nothing approach with Judkins. And you talk about a guy who had a 22.8% stuff rate, which is the percentage of his runs that go for no gain or a loss. That was actually the 10th highest in the country in FBS. Wow. He also needs to do a better job. And part of that is doing better work against heavier boxes, right? When you talk about 7 or more box defenders on defense, just a 77.6 rushing grade in those situations. And you talk about the great backs really being able to, when everybody knows you're going to run it, running right through the teeth of it and still having a successful run. Judkins is decent with that. in 2023, but not elite. There are other backs in this top 10 who had 90 plus grades against loaded boxes. And, you talk about a Big Ten where running and stopping the run is really at a premium. You've got defenses like Michigan, like Iowa, like Wisconsin, like Nebraska. You got really good defenses. And when you talk about loaded boxes like that, 5 of the top 11 defenses that perform with loaded boxes are in the Big Ten. One of them is Ohio State, and he'll be practicing against them every day, so maybe he'll get a lot of reps going for it. But he just needs to do a better job sometimes with taking what the defense gives him, right? We talk about that with quarterbacks a lot, and sometimes, man, 4 or 5 yards is just the answer. And now it's going to help. His situation's going to help. He's got Chip Kelly, runs his offense at a really fast pace, can wear down defenses, linebackers, things like that. D linemen, if they can't get the rotations out going. Curious to see where that goes now that quarterbacks are allowed to have the mic in the helmet. And we'll see what the pace of play looks like without maybe all the cardboard signs on the sideline and all that. But anyway, you've got Henderson who can take some physical work, but there's going to be times where Judkins is going to see a 7, 8, 9-man box in the Big Ten, and he's got to run through it. So I'd like to see him not mess around so much behind the line of scrimmage, because those negative runs really do hurt you when you're talking about, now we're in 2nd and 11, or we're in 3rd and 10 when we had a run on 2nd down. We're trying to get positive yards. So take the positive yards more often. But the floor for him and his situation is why he's so high on this list.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a great breakdown by you. And that, I guess the heavier boxes, he just wasn't as effective, which makes sense when you watch some of his tape too. One of the biggest negatives I had with his tape is that he's just not much of a receiver out of the backfield, which is why I think Trayvon Henderson, especially as a pass blocker, would be a great 3rd down back for Ohio State. And Judkins could be more of the 1st and 2nd down guy. In his career, he has 281 receiving yards. So not really much of a receiver, and about 140 a year. And a guy that was heavily, heavily relied on in that Ole Miss offense, and he still only had 140 receiving yards per year, basically, in Ole Miss's offense. So I also think he's a good, not great athlete. Only 8% breakaway run rate in his career, which is in the 46th percentile. So I don't think he's got great top speed either. I don't think he's an elite athlete. I think he's a good enough athlete, don't get me wrong, but I don't think he's a world-class athlete like some of the other guys that we're talking about on this list. So I think his athleticism, the receiving ability, that's what's really holding Judkins back from being truly like a unbelievable running back. I also think he's below average in terms of pass blocking ability too. He was 93rd this past year with a 43.3 pass blocking grade. He can really get ragdolled sometimes in pass blocking. And there's a couple reps against, I remember Abdul Carter in the bowl game where he embarrassed him. Now, of course, Abdul Carter probably going to be a top 20 pick in the NFL draft at edge defender. So it's not saying too much when he's, ragdolling a running back, but still want to see a little bit more out of Judkins in that area as well. But regardless, Quinshon Judkins overall extremely productive as a runner, and that's why it comes in at number 2 on our list.